It's the Evening Emperor Show. It's the Evening Emperor Show, and we're going to make it short, actually. Believe it or not. We're going to try to sum it all up. I have summoned, oh, I'm like way loud. I have summoned my boy, Christian Wagner, the militant Thomist. His world's on fire. You got to show some support. You got to do it. The guy's a good guy. Even if you think he's wrong, man, the dude's a good guy. What are you guys thinking? Are you out of your minds? Have fun debating, by the way. I hope I see you in here, militant Thomist. And I hope you bring all your friends, bring all your boys. Throw down right here in the octagon because we're going straight into it. I gotta say this, you may as well right now go get your xylophone, go get your shofar, go get your guitar, go get all the instruments you possibly have, and of course, the carrier pigeons. Because we bet them buggers, right? That way, they're not telling any kind of lie. Why? It's simple. Because they're letting the world know that we are about to enter the octagon. We're about to enter the octagon of church history, and in this case, apologetic history. We're going to be talking about William Lane Craig's phony chuckler. I'm so sorry. His logical howler. Garbage, poo-poo trash. It's true. But before we do, we got to do what we always do. We have to take a knee for Christ the King. And why? Simply put, because we're living right now in terribly, terribly wicked times. All around us, the nihilism, the sin, the debauchery, all the wickedness all around us. We have to take a knee for Christ the King. He is Lord and Savior of all right now. He has all power and all authority right now. So take a knee and resolve in your heart every thought, word, deed to Him, aligning it with the divine constitution of the visible church. And we do that here by resolving to never give up, to keep on smiling, and memento mori. Remember, you're going to die. Remember, you are going to die. Okay? It's just a fact. And the thing is, you don't even know when you're going to die. You have no clue. And I know this because this past week has been the rough and tumble for your boy. It has. It's the Triduum that we've got. All right? We've got a Triduum. We have the day of our daughter's death, the day of her funeral. The day of her daughter's death was Samantha, 12 years old. I don't know if you can see. Oh, bring it in here, woman. Come on now. My wife, mega hot, half Korean beauty queen wife. Oh, and look at this. Look what she brought me. Look how awesome this is. I have the best wife in the universe, boys. Cake, ice cream. What is this thing called?
Mochi.
Mochi? Mochi.
I think that's what it's called.
Yes. And this particular mochi, it is a Korean dessert, and this one here is mint chocolate chip. So I got mint chocolate chip. I got my wife's birthday cake because her birthday is July 21st. Okay? So on the 17th, my daughter died. On the 21st, she had her funeral. Okay? And the next day or 2 days later, we had the burial. The last time we saw her at all. And so this week has been tough, right? The last couple weeks. But it's all the more. And not just that, but other things, right? Other things. And it's just, all I want to say is if you think you're going through a hard time, right? Don't look at me and say, oh, this guy's going, I can't imagine. If you haven't been through it, believe me, that's true. But there are multiple people, not multiple, tons and tons and tons in this world right now, going through things that even when we were going through our absolute worst with my daughter, that I could not imagine. That I could not imagine being alone. That I could not imagine that particular kind of cancer or the way that it was affecting that child or that spouse. And so don't look at me about that, right? About getting through the hard times. Instead, just take this bit of advice, okay? I found it very helpful at different times. To when you're going through a hard time and you're looking all around you and you think that the world is lost and you're all sorts of, upset, right? All upset about the even stuff going on in the church, stuff that you see, stuff that you hear. When that happens, go find a real private place. I'm dead serious about this. Go find a private place. In fact, I got to take these glasses off or else you guys won't take me seriously. Find a private place. And when you find that place, make sure that you're all alone, because you're going to get loud. You are going to growl. You are going to grit those teeth until you feel that they're going to crack. You're going to grind them, and you're going to shake your fist at heaven, and you're going to give it everything you've got. You're going to cry out as loud as you possibly can. Why me? Why me, God? Why would you allow this to happen to yours truly? And at that very moment, when you feel like your teeth are about to snap into a million pieces, at that very moment, grab a crucifix, grab a rosary out of your pocket, and look at that dying man. Behold the man. And feel a little bit ashamed. Because no matter what you're going through, no matter what I went through with my daughter, no matter what anybody went through, nothing compares to that. And yet, that's the reason we have to hope, right? That's the reason we have, in fact, to be glad even in times of trouble. That no matter how dark the night is, we can believe with all of our heart that joy comes in the morning. And it gives us a good reason to try to settle disputes in private. Sometimes you can't. Sometimes the people you need to settle a dispute with don't want to talk with you in private. That's a really tragic thing. They should maybe go back and reconsider. They should look in the scriptures and think about it. But the truth is, no matter what it is you're going through, no matter how bad it is, it's nothing compared to what you can behold in the man on the crucifix. Before we begin, I'm going to go ahead real quick. We're going to go ahead and play this promo for the SAINTMAKER. If you've already seen it, make sure to grab your drink, your juice, your coffee. I don't know where you are in the world. Some people are watching this in the morning. Tomorrow, by the way. All sorts of craziness. So no matter what it is, if it's booze, right? I had myself, I'm almost out of the Kraken. And it bums me out. It does, because it's a delicious, well, not necessarily the most delicious thing in the world, but at the same time, there's a nostalgia to it. And so no matter what it is, make sure you go and get it. If you have not, however, seen the SAINTMAKER, I implore you with all of my heart, do not leave. Watch this, because it's the kind of thing that can dramatically transform your life. And if you're doing the SAINTMAKER right now, and I'm upset because I tell people that I know people are buying it through the program. And why do I know that? Because I get portion of the proceeds. And so it's paid advertisement. I put it on here. I have to click the little button, say, yeah, there's paid advertisement. I get a portion of the proceeds, and all of that money goes to one of two things. The bulk of it goes to my kids' education. This is why I do the show. On the other hand, I also have decided to ramp it up a bit and start paying some of the people who work here. In fact, the only people who work here. So there are others who help out with what we do to make this happen. And I know a lot of apostolates, they don't pay a penny to their people. Their people, it's all about, well, we give you a platform. And look, there's a value to that. But I really do take very seriously the idea of giving a worker the wages. We debated that in the Wolfpack chat. If you're not in that, you're crazy. You got to check it out. But for now, check out this, because this is going to radically transform your life. And it's going to make sure that no matter what kind of wages you get, you're not only going to do the best you can with whatever it happens to be that you have, but more than that, you're going to make your way to heaven. If you do it right, and you do it consistently, trust me, you're going to be in a good place. So don't go nowhere. We will be right back in, 90 seconds or so. Can a personal planner really make you a saint? Not by itself. But in our day and age of addictive apps and glowing screens, we're bombarded by constant distraction, and our quest for sainthood often takes a backseat. The SAINTMAKER is the first high-performance planner for the spiritual life, made by faithful Catholics for faithful Catholics. It's a work of genius, really, fusing the wisdom of the saints with the science of personal productivity. It's rigorous, but sainthood is tough, and most of us need help organizing our time, our work, our leisure, and our devotion, because that can help you become a saint. The SAINTMAKER is elegant, fits in your purse or briefcase, and is a perfect companion for your missal, Bible, or rosary. Published 4 times per year, each season includes daily planning pages, feast days, and devotions for both forms of the liturgical calendar, goal-setting pages, confession journals, and more. It's why the SAINTMAKER is used by hardworking Catholics, like CEO of Sock Religious Scott Williams, best-selling author Sam Guzman, YouTubers like Amber Schneider, a Catholic wife Dina Barca and Brian Holdsworth, and priests like Father Corey Stitcha. Try the SAINTMAKER out, and if you decide that it's not for you, you can send it back for a full refund within 90 days. So go right now. Find your life planner at thesaintmaker.com. Quantities are limited though, so head on over to thesaintmaker.com to order yours and to start your SAINTMAKER journey today. You got to do it over there, saintmaker.com/PaleocratDiaries. You got to do it. It's awesome. Totally awesome. All right. We're going to get into the live chat here in a second. Oh, I wasn't even going to play this music. I'm so accustomed to it. You got to get it out because we're going to be rocking it out right now. And we're going to be talking about Colin Causey's article. And it's not even an article. It's not even a blog. It's terrible. It's at his website, the Catholic Areopagus. You got to go. You got to check it out. I have the link in the description below. You can read the entire thing. I strongly implore you, in fact, to just print it out. Get your highlighters and get more than one because you're going to run out. It's really good and it's really long. It's like 32 pages of epic awesomeness. And more than that, he's in the chat right now. Although I do not see right now, my boy Militant Thomist. He's letting me down. He's in my chat right now at the Wolfpack chat. If you like Militant Thomist and you want to debate him, right, over his hot takes, or you want to support him, right? No matter what it is, you say, I think he's wrong, whatever. No matter what, make sure you can go over there. That's where he is. He's also, of course, he's got a Discord. It's bumping. He's got a voice chat over there. I've been in there a couple times. Super pumped about that. So you got to make sure. And if you're over there in the chat right now and you're kind of going between both places in the universe, you're like over in the chat and then you're over in the voice chat and then you're over in this chat. If you're going back and forth, Wolfpack live chat, Wolfpack YouTube, if you're doing that, you got to make sure relay the message from your boy because I'm on the air. And because it would be great to see it play out right here. I have been gone all day long. I would like, in fact, to be able to see it. And so make sure, let him know. I would definitely like to see that guy. All right, we're going to drop that down. All right, real quick, we are going to go to the comment section. Not long. How long have I been doing this so far? I've been doing it for 15 minutes. Crud. I didn't plan on doing that last part. That was the whole plan. I was like, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to try to sum it up into the beginning so that I can get going because we got to rock. We got to get out of here. So I can't go too long. Yes, Maria, I got to give you credit. Got to give you props. You are in first place. You beat Phil and you beat Colin Causey, the author of the article or the essay that we're going to be talking about. As I said, if you want to reach out to him, just put @Colin and he will be notified immediately. If you would like to connect with me tonight, you're going to have to do @TheMeaningOfCatholic. If you missed the last episode, I'm not surprised. I have recently rejuvenated my YouTube channel. And so you've got to go, if you're not subscribed to it, you've got to do it because there's going to be a lot more there. That's going to be at Paleocrat on YouTube, youtube.com/Paleocrat. All right, let's see. I love the thumbnail, but poor Dr. Craig. Poor Dr. Craig. What are you talking about, Colin? I like him and have definitely profited from his work. Look, yes. Okay, so Colin, there's a difference between me and Colin, too. There's many, in fact. And we've fleshed out some of these on the show. And after each show, I try to make sure that I adequately represented what he said if and when I happen to disagree with something that he said, even in his defense of presuppositionalism. And why? Because he's coming from a perspective that is more mainstream. He's more Thomistic and I'm more Bonaventurian, okay? And so in that regard, that's a huge difference. And so for him to be able to do this is extremely important. But Dr. Craig, look, he otherwise fine, right? Otherwise fine. But you come out saying it's a logical howler. Dude, you dismantled it. You dismantled one of the ideas. The other one you simply redirected to say, look, this is who you're talking about. You're not, however, talking about these people. And to be fair to Dr. Craig, he probably is in his head thinking about Reformed apologetics. He's not thinking about Catholic presuppositionalism. He's not thinking about Eastern Orthodox presuppositionalism, the various schools of thought, because there are. There are various schools of thought as to how this works. Of course, I maintain the position that the church is essential to this, that the church is supreme in this. And I take that position because of St. Matthew 18. And we discussed that in the series about St. Francis de Sales, what he calls the invincible argument. And so that's ultimately, I believe, even I go so far as to say that there is a transcendental argument, even the interpretational model that is used for St. Matthew 18, because we're talking about ultimate authority in that case. So you can find out more about that, of course, in the link in the description below about the full catalog, and it's a good time. Enslaved by Truth, I always know what I'm in for, man. I always know I'm in for some trouble. What is he going to say? Is this the Catholic Jay Dyer? You are saying that because you're trying to, rile me up. The truth is, you're not going to. Because, look, I've said a lot about Jay Dyer. I've said a lot about him. Very, very rarely have I even said a negative word, in fact. There are obvious differences. That's not even a question, okay? He has an anti-Catholic polemic going on over there. At the same time, I'm very grateful for many of the things he does. And I will leave it at that because I've said plenty of it before. But I will go so far as to say he's got the receipts. So, in that sense, I've been talking about Catholic presuppositionalism since, 2006, 2007? It was back in the days of Zanga. I did a 5-part series. In fact, I'm searching for it now because I believe that I have them printed out. And if I have them printed out, I will share them at PaleocratDiaries.com. That will ultimately go to our Patreon, link in description below, as well as the Wolfpack chat. And again, link in the description below. All right, let's see. Justin the Catholic said, dude, you're awesome. Well, I appreciate it, homeboy. I appreciate it big time. I'm really grateful for it. And by the sound of it, you seem pretty awesome too. It's not a big thing to say, oh, I appreciate those who appreciate me. But I do appreciate you, bro. I do. So thank you very much. Losing weight, eating dessert. LOL, my man. Yes, that, I haven't promoted that. I'll just say this. Fat Shame to Fitness. It's the greatest thing in the world. You eat whatever you want. It doesn't matter. I'm eating. In fact, I will eat it right in front of your face. Okay? So check this out. Oh, it started to melt. Oh, no. No. Melting big time. So that right there is the Korean dessert that is mint chocolate chip. I'm now going to eat, what is this here? Well, cookies and cream and birthday cake. Check this out. Losing weight. Losing weight. Watch this. I'm going to eat a second bite. Look at this. This is crazy. This is nuts. I'm mukbanging right now. Check this out. We're getting to the topic in a second. Watch this. Losing weight. Losing weight. I don't know if you've noticed. Okay? Yeah. Losing weight, we have a Fat Shame to Fitness program that is eat whatever you want, but only eat when you're hungry, and know the difference between spiritual and emotional and physical urges, right, for hunger, that you're longing for something, and that if you're not physically hungry, and there are certain cues that God has given us, He did not leave us in a place where we just see a billboard for McDonald's and say, oh my gosh, I'm really hungry all of a sudden for some reason. No, He did not do that. And so He gave us certain cues. We follow those cues. We eat when we are genuinely hungry. If we find ourselves at the pantry or the fridge and we're not physically hungry, we pray. We consider that the ding dong. We consider that the doorbell from heaven, letting us know, the doorbell of our heart, to say, you got to pray. You got to do the right thing. And so you're praying more. You're only eating when you're hungry, and you're only eating till you're full, and you learn how to do that and what it means. And in doing so, I've lost a bunch of weight. In fact, my pants, I'm having to get rid of a whole bunch of stuff. Shirts, pants. I'm down like 2.5 cassock sizes. Yeah, it's totally awesome, by the way. Totally awesome. Yeah, Fort Equinox says, the meaning of Catholic, I love the shirt. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Yes. I'm saying it because of the shirt. Jared. Yeah. I appreciate that too. So, all right. We are moving on. We're moving on. So, okay. I said we're going to talk about this. We're going to try to wrap it up as soon as we possibly can, because I want to get to the live chat back at the Wolfpack chat. I'll be on there for about a half an hour at the most. So we'll go ahead and we'll go through this. We're going to talk today about whose presuppositionalism. Okay. Yes, the last program we talked about the idea of culpability, the idea of the indubitability or the self-evident nature of God's existence within us, that it's self-evident. In fact, I make the contention, not here, I make the contention that it is, along with St. Bonaventure, that it is the most self-evident truth. And so it is more self-evident, in fact, to every single person that has ever been created than any created truth. But in this part, whose presuppositionalism? Returning at last to Trent Horn's article, and this was the one that got published, a lot of it was kind of a rehash of some of stuff that he said, or if he wrote it beforehand, what he said was a rehash of the article, but he did it twice, right? So the article and the debate with Dyer, he talked about natural law, talked about presuppositionalism, used a lot of the same arguments. Returning at last to Trent Horn's article, given all that has thus far been said, I do not think that Trent's case that presuppositionalism as a method of apologetics is essentially and hopelessly question-begging has been made. Okay, obviously. For I think that Trent's case rests on a misconception of presuppositionalism, at least good presuppositionalism. More on this in a moment. Which is captured in this quote from William Lane Craig. What is the quote? What's the quote? Let's see if I can tone down this red on my face. Real quick. There we go. A little bit. A little easier. So here's the quote, okay? About presuppositionalism. So, quote, presuppositionalism is guilty of a logical howler. I can imagine him saying in the moment. Not really. I'm not meaning to bust your chops. Well, a little bit, because you said it's a logical howler here, okay? So he said presuppositionalism is guilty of, a logical howler. It commits the informal fallacy, right, of petitio principii. Is it principii? How would you pronounce that? I'm terrible, by the way. I always hold it against anybody who puts it in Latin. I'm like, guys, give me a break here. I was a Protestant kid at a Protestant school, man. We weren't like Hillsdale kids, you know what I mean? Or begging the question. Why not just say that, man? Well, in fairness, I'm glad he didn't, because he's speaking to a specific crowd. It's a little bit different than the crowd that I'm speaking to. For it advocates presupposing the truth of a Christian theism in order to prove Christian theism. That's what he says. End quote. The idea seems to be that adopting presuppositionalism commits the apologist to basing his case on the following argument. And you'll hear this. In fact, Trent Horn explicitly said this. You want to see your boy get angry, go back to the day of the debate between Dyer and Trent Horn. In that debate, Trent Horn, he did the howler on our side. We said, oh, what a silly thing to say. What he said was, basically, you assume that God exists, therefore God exists. Or the Bible says God exists, therefore God exists. And I think that way of framing it really does reveal that he's kind of like conflating everything. He's kind of lumping it all in together. And I think he did that with his tweet recently, where he finally mentioned your boy. He wanted to throw me a little bit in a clown car. I still haven't heard back from him. It's really letting me down a little bit. I sent him a very thought out, courteous, polite, encouraging, prayerful letter in the mail. Well, in email. I sent him an email breaking down. I didn't just go on Twitter and try to get him numbers and all that stuff and build up the algorithm. In fact, I took it very seriously, because I do take this. I know it's hard to imagine that, because sometimes I act real wild. I mean, look, I wear these at the beginning of the show, okay? I know what I'm doing, but I want you to know, and everybody else to know, that I am really deadly serious, in fact, about this topic. I genuinely believe with all of my heart that it is long overdue for the Catholic world to have that debate. that takes place about methodology. It's been bubbling up all over the place. It's already happened in different ways, but not this one. This one was reserved in many ways, wrongfully so, in my opinion, to the Protestant world. Sparked, of course, by Cornelius Van Til. But they threw us in the clown car, right? And we look at that and we say, who says, I assume that God exists, therefore God exists? I've made so many videos about this topic. I've made tons and tons and tons. And not one time, not once, have I used that argument. Zero. We're talking hours, dozens of hours, dozens and dozens and dozens in my lifetime of hours of reading, videos, YouTube, AM/FM radio, okay? TV. I had a local TV program. It wasn't huge. It was local, right? It was like on a local channel. But I had a TV show, and we talked about these issues. I debated people on radio repeatedly over and over again. I used this methodology successfully, in fact, over and over and over again. And why? Not because I made it up, but because I believe that that was the methodology advanced by other saints. And we've done videos about those. Colin says, hence, this form of argument is logically invalid. Okay. Oh, I'm so sorry about that. I went ahead. Sorry. This argument, of course, is obviously worthless. The idea, I assume God exists, therefore God exists. Have you ever talked to anybody that even thinks that way at all? Have you ever? I mean, be honest about that they look you in the eye and they say that, I assume God exists, therefore he exists. Got you, pwned. Check out that 4D chess I just did on you. I'm a ninja. Have you ever dealt with somebody like that? Interestingly enough, Colin found somebody, and he seems like a nice guy, but his arguments are garbage, okay? The Protestant apologist Steve Schramm, there he is, in his article on presuppositionalism entitled My Journey from Evidential to Presuppositional Apologetics, writes it as follows: all ultimate authorities must be circular. Consider this logic. If God existed, he would claim to be God. God claims to be God. Therefore, God exists. This is a circular argument. But if it is true, it does not matter if it's circular or not. It would be irrational to conclude anything else if the premises, right? If God existed, he would claim to be God. God claims to be God. That's true. This is nothing but a tissue of logical errors and confusion. By the way, Colin, there are so many times in this essay, man, you just absolutely crack me up, homie. And you're like, yeah. So I say wigwam, you say tissue, right? This is just a tissue of logical errors and confusion. It is, as Jeremiah Bannister would colorfully put it, poo-poo, trash, nonsense. It's poo-poo trash. It's poo-poo trash. First, arguments themselves are neither true nor false. Rather, they are either sound or unsound. It is the premises, right? Premises in arguments which bear truth values, not the arguments themselves. For example, he rewrites this, okay? I'll show you on the screen, okay? So I wrote it on, I talked to him actually. I'm like, help me to know just so I don't mess anything up here, right? He said, we can rewrite the argument for God's existence that Schramm proposes symbolically in propositional logic as follows. If G, then C, G implies C, therefore. Okay, so basic argument here. And if we imagine in this case that G is God exists and C is God claims to be God, then it would read like this. If God exists, then God claims to be God. God exists implies God claims to be God. Therefore, God exists. Okay? Did you follow that? If not, put it on rewind. You'll be able to do that after the fact. We'll break it down a little bit for you, okay? So Schramm, in fact, not only does this argument commit the informal fallacy of begging the question, it also commits the formal logical fallacy of affirming the consequent. Consequently, the argument is not even valid. For example, to break it down in a simple way, I was talking about modus ponens, right? Modus ponens and from the consequent. So you would have modus ponens would say if P, and P, these letters plug in stuff, right? That would go together, right? If P, then Q, P, therefore Q. Okay? So that's the basic idea of modus ponens. If you flip this around, right, that Schramm's argument, were it to be in fact reversed, would be if P, then Q. Okay, so the same first part. Q instead of P. Q. Therefore, P. Okay? That is a serious problem. That is a serious issue here with this, where it would be reversed. Right? Yeah, or Q, therefore Q, right? So you would have, it would be inverse. You'd have a serious problem. You'd be affirming the consequent of this. So that would be a logical fallacy. And in this case, that's exactly what Schramm is doing. So what does that mean? What it means is the argument itself is not even valid. It's not even a valid argument. The mere fact that we're talking about this here and trying to break it down and trying to understand it and wrap our heads around and say, okay, what's valid, what's not valid? How does this work? How does this not work? What would be acceptable? What would be unacceptable? What would be sound and what would be unsound? It would be like this, okay? So the fallacy. If Koa is a cat, then Koa is an animal. Koa is an animal, therefore Koa is a cat. Do you catch the problem? So it would still be the way that we described it earlier. It would still be the way we described earlier. Because in this situation, just because Koa is an animal doesn't mean, therefore, that Koa is a cat. But if Koa is a cat, it would follow that Koa is an animal. Okay? Again, if Koa is a cat, and just think about it. If Koa is a cat, then Koa is an animal. Koa is an animal, therefore, Koa is a cat. We can rewrite this symbolically as follows. If we have C, for example, Koa is a cat, and A, Koa is an animal. It'd be a little bit like this, okay? So if Koa is a cat, then we would be dealing with, I'm going back and forth. He had it right here on the end. Then Koa is an animal. Koa is an animal, therefore, Koa is a cat. That also doesn't make any sense, okay? Both premises are true, but the conclusion is false. Just because it's an animal doesn't mean it's a cat. And, so you have a serious problem here. Hence, this form of argument is logically invalid. And I apologize. I wish I had a screenshot. Maybe I should have just shown it on here, right? So he's got it laid out like that. Symbolic. He's got all the symbols lined up and everything. So if people aren't even familiar, and I talked to him, I was like, look, it's one of those things where, I'm more familiar with journalese than some of this. And it's one of the myriad reasons that I'm truly grateful for people like him. And I'm glad to be working with other people. And why I'm more than willing to admit that I'm little more than the icebreaker crashing through the sheets of ice in order that people, in fact, like Colin Causey, would be able to get through as a supply ship. Yeah. I mean that, buddy. There's one way in which Schramm's argument can be made valid, and that's if we have recourse to first-order predicate logic. And this is going to get real weird. When we were talking about it, I said, look, break this down for me about what it means, right? Break it down for what it means. He said we can symbolically represent Schramm's premises in predicate logic as follows. Okay, so where G is God, for example, C being claims to be God, it would go a little bit like this. Okay, and in fact, why don't I just show you? I can go ahead. Let me go ahead and pop this bugger up right now. Properties. Preview. There we go. So I'm just gonna pull this up. We're just gonna put it on the bottom of the screen. Okay. We'll go ahead and put it down here. Okay. So as you can see, that is the way that he has it laid out. The guy's speaking in tongues at you, by the way. You can hold it against him. A little eats or bits. Little eats or bits. Okay. Yeah, modus ponens. Yeah, we need it in you. And yes, I know you guys need a Venn diagram for this stuff. And that's why I said I wish I would have just taken pictures of it like this and just put it on the screen, and that way people would be able to see it right there on the screen. I'll make sure in the Wolfpack chat to put it on there. And look, the link is in the description. You can go ahead and read it through. It's about the 75% mark. You go 75% through the article, and you'll find it. It stands out like a sore thumb, okay? Especially when it looks like this. But the idea with this is there exists an X, okay, entity, such that X is God, implies that there exists an X such that X is God, and X claims to be God. There exists an X such that X is God, and X claims to be God. I won't go into that much more than that. It's already a little bit weird. It's already a little bit like, holy cow, what's going on with this? What is going on with this? Oh, and I didn't even get it. Yeah. So you can at least see the logical layout. You can see the way that symbolically it's laid out, okay, what he's trying to say. Okay. The second premise in that, of course, being there exists an X such that X is God and X claims to be God, right? The second premise, if true, immediately implies that God exists, because the translation of God claims to be God is predicate logic, right? In predicate logic, reads as, quote, there exists an X such that X is God and X claims to be God. He says he's not going to get into the philosophical controversy about whether the existential quantifier of first order logic carries with it ontological commitment. He's going to simply assume that it does for the present purpose in order to be maximally charitable to Schramm. And I appreciate that, by the way. I have things I can learn from you, brother. I have things I can learn from you to say I can be more charitable, maximally so, to other people. I enjoy poking shots, but I can be maximally charitable and say, this guy, he seems like a decent dude. Maybe he's wrong. If he understood why he's wrong and how he's wrong and you laid it out in a way like this, maybe he would be able to accept it and avoid the Howler being talked about by William Lane Craig. Consequently, the first premise of that is entirely superfluous, with respect at least to deriving the desired conclusion. On a small note, technically, arguments themselves do not beg the question, but rather arguers do. An arguer in this case is guilty of begging the question if it is the case that the only reason that he accepts one or more of the premises, right, in an argument is that he already accepts the conclusion. So if that's what you do, you say the premises, the premises of these arguments, I only accept them in this way. In that sense, you would in fact be begging the question because you already just simply accept the conclusion. If in general there is no reason to accept these claims, right, of an argument, except that the conclusion is already accepted, then such arguments are dialectically and apologetically useless. They'd be useless. So when people say, the Bible says God is true, therefore God is true, that argument's not going to get you very far. It doesn't have tons of legs. If you say, there's a God out there that says that he's the true God, therefore he's the true God, that's not going to get you very far. Or, I assume that God exists, therefore God exists. That's not going to get you too far. Okay? It would be ultimately those arguments, right, dialectically and apologetically useless. No one who doesn't already accept the conclusion of the argument is going to accept the premises. So, even if a circular argument is sound, it will be useless, in fact, to apologetics. To further illustrate, and let me, I don't know where he would stand on this, but using, presupposing reason as an ultimate standard and using reason to prove reason, right? I mean, that to me, maybe there's a distinction to be made between something circular that runs down a course for a moment and loops back around, and something that's transcendental that simply proves it by the impossibility of the contrary. To further illustrate this, consider the following argument against Schramm's brand of presuppositionalism. Okay, so he's now going to go after this particular guy. And you may hear this sometimes from people who are, reformed in their apologetic, right? And fall prey to this. But here's how it would lay out. If Schramm's presuppositionalism is false, then Schramm's presuppositionalism is false. Schramm's presuppositionalism is false, therefore Schramm's presuppositionalism is false. My ice cream is melting. I did not even realize this. I apologize. I've got to do this or else it's just going to melt and it's going to be all watery and terrible. And so, it's not terrible, but I have to drink it through a straw. I'm not going to do that on the air. No way. No way. All right. I apologize. Well, I don't apologize for this. Are you serious? I'm eating ice cream and I'm eating Oreo cookie. Yeah, Oreo cookie, ice cream, chocolate cake with vanilla icing. Man, I ain't apologizing one bit. I'm losing weight. Come on, son. All I need now, I mixed the cake together with that. All I need now are some gummy worms. It'd feel like dirt cake. Will this argument convince Schramm? It's doubtful. It's doubtful. If Trent and Craig have someone like Schramm in mind in their critiques of presuppositionalism, then I can understand where they're coming from. That's what he says. And I agree with that. If, when they talk about that and say, oh, it's a logical howler. It's a logical howler. These guys are a big fat joke. Yeah, it's a chuckler. If that's really what they believe and that's what they've got in their mind, look, I'd be like, dude, I'm chuckling along with you, buddy. That's what I would say to him. However, I do think, Colin, he says, I do think there is a good and effective version, such as is defended, for instance, by the aforementioned ya boy. By ya boy. He's impressed with the argument. He says, look, there's a viable version of this. It does not fall prey to those criticisms. I think a stumbling block, and this is something dead serious, okay? I think a stumbling block in critical discussion of presuppositionalism is the name presuppositionalism and the language in general of presupposing the Christian worldview. The name itself, I think, can engender suspicions that the apologist is simply assuming what is to be proved without argument, because there are arguments involved. And even Reformed apologists would admit, at least Bonson and company, they would admit that. In fact, in his debate with R.C. Sproul, he specifically asked, how is this an argument? And he brought up Aristotle about logic and said that Aristotle, or Kant, right, in Kant's criticisms, to say, look, these guys, they believed they were making an argument transcendentally. Jeremiah's objection is that the reason we cannot presuppose atheistic nihilism, for example, is one of the things that Trent Horn brought up. He said, why can't you just presuppose atheistic nihilism? Why can't you just presuppose that? And we've gone through that so many times. I'm like, are you serious? I'm doing a series on it. I kind of took a break for a second to do this. We've still got more chapters to go. We're going through a book called Nihilism. Okay? But the reason why we cannot is because it cannot make sense, speaking of atheistic nihilism, it cannot make sense of reality and consequently collapses in on itself. In this case, Trent and Jeremiah are simply not talking about the same presuppositionalism. And that's an obvious thing, I think, in charity and in just being honest about it. And I don't blame him. It's tough sometimes, right? Because you put so much time and effort into what you're doing. And you say, I'm really trying hard to make the case as best I can. Admitting the deficiencies, admitting the inabilities, right? The things that I struggle with, the things that I'm not good at. I was talking to him about the difference between understanding the language of philosophers, for example, and it's something I'm working on. I'm actually talking to different theologians right now about getting a master's degree. Because I have a bachelor's. I was going for a master's degree, never completed it. And I was going for presuppositional apologetics, but it was reformed apologetics. But the point is that while I can say that my time in journalism school, that allowed me and equipped me to speak journalese, and I do that sometimes when we talk about media theory and other things. We talk about journalese, right? We use discussions, information silos, the third person effect, right? You have the two-step flow. You have the nut graph, things like that, the lead. There are all different phrases that journalists use, inverted pyramid, that to us, that's a language that we're familiar with. And there's a sense, though, that sort of thing can be a problem in this world here that I'm in. And if people don't know that language, and if you're not doing a good job clarifying what you mean by that, you may have people inside the group that know, but not outside. And I know that very, very well because we use phrases on this show like monocle man. We use certain descriptors. Monocle man, suspicionista, right? We talk about that. Crypto sede, enthusiast, sede system. There are different things that we use when talking about people, groups, phases in kind of, in the many phases in that spectrum towards schism, that road that should be a slow stroll, but oftentimes turns into an arms race. We use those words, and to us, they're meaningful. To us, they make a lot of sense. But to people who are out group, it doesn't. And so to them, it's just irritable. It's just, that guy's making fun of me. And there's a little bit of that. But not for just any reason whatsoever, for reasons that when talking about it would harken back to the magisterium. Jeremiah, would you consider abandoning the term presup? If not the term, absolutely. I made the case back in the day that distributists should get rid of the word distributism. The guy who came up with distributivism, which was the original word, distributivism, Arthur Penty, he rejected distributivism later on in his life. He rejected it. He's the guy who came up with the idea, right? It was popularized by Chester Belloc and company. But the truth was, they didn't come up with the word. They didn't come up with the idea of the phrase. And he wrote an article eventually why he was doing it, why he walked away. And I made the case that when people call themselves distributists and they're saying, hey, look, they believe in distributive justice. We live in a time where, whether good or bad, I personally think it's unfortunate because distributive justice means something, but it's kind of like the same underlying principle at play with people who are like, look, I know what the rainbow means, so I'm going to put a rainbow flag on my house. Everybody's going to think you're gay, dude. Everybody's going to think you're gay. Everybody who thinks that you believe in distributism is going to think that you're some kind of crazy socialistic statist. And you're going to get that for real. You're going to really get that. You're going to get people coming at you like crazy. Even if you spend enormous amounts of time criticizing socialism, doesn't matter. Because the word itself invokes certain ideas. So I understand that. And that's actually, to me, that's media theory talking. I understand that. And I would have no reservations whatsoever if there was a better phrase. But here's the only caveat, right? Is that if we did that and we said, well, we're not talking about Catholic presuppositionalism anymore, The mere fact, the ordering of things, the way that we've structured those things, the way that we follow the models of St. Francis de Sales, the way that we followed the model of St. Irenaeus, that eventually, if we're debating somebody who is alert, they're going to say, hey, look, it sounds like presuppositionalism to me. Yeah, but I'm 100% open to it. I have no affinity to the name itself. It's just the name that most people recognize it by. And in that regard, I'm actually doing something I don't normally do. And that is talking in a way that even to my detriment would at least make sense. And it would force me to explain it. It would raise the bar higher for me. But it would at least make sense to those people outgroup, to the people on the outside of that system who are critical of the word or what they have in their head regarding that system. It's more demanding upon me, right? The burden. But it's something that I, for at least the time being, have said, well, that's just what it is. I don't mind. And if you've got a good idea, let us know. Let us know. Yeah, and people can say truth is the correspondence between mind and reality. But the idea that it's purely correspondence without an understanding of coherence, to say, you know, well, my understanding of an isolated object, you don't understand that object, you don't understand the eye outside of the face. You can, I guess, but you're going to have a really difficult time. And it's Frank Sheed. Frank Sheed made that argument profoundly. I don't know if it was the Introduction to Theology or Theology for Beginners or what it was. Fantastic, by the way. Yeah. But the idea is, you know, to believe that you can just simply know, and I've talked about this too many times before, I won't say it too much. Of course, it has to correspond. At the same time, reality is not, it is one and many things at the same time. It's not like looking at a glass jar. But what is a glass jar? A glass jar is also what it's not. It's not this can of pop. And so it's within a context, like letters to words, words to sentences, sentences to paragraphs. And we connect that, I do, personally. I connect that with my view, a Bonaventurian view regarding the knowledge of God being pure act in the mind, being the first thing to fall in to the intellect. Bonaventure. The name itself can engender suspicions that the apologist is simply assuming what is to be proven without argument. Jeremiah's objection is that the reason we cannot presuppose atheistic nihilism is because it cannot make sense of reality, and consequently, of course, it collapses in on itself. In this case, we, of course, are not talking about the same thing. For Trent, presuppositionalism is the method of arbitrarily assuming what is to be proved without argument. This is bad presuppositionalism. For Jeremiah, that's me, presuppositionalism is one, the recognition that the Christian apologist does not arbitrarily stipulate, but indeed already knows Christianity to be true. And two, the method of worldview comparison and analysis, what Jeremiah refers to as systems analysis, in which the fundamental presuppositions of worldviews as a whole are examined and critiqued. This is good presuppositionalism. Thus, it would seem that good presuppositionalism has a PR problem. Perhaps this could be solved by simply renaming it systems apologetics. It's an idea. Again, if you've got an idea for that, I'm all ears. I'm all ears. I have no stake in that phrase, in that particular definition. In fact, it's caused me enormous problems. But even if it were to go away, there's a sense by which a rose is a rose by any other name. So people will continue to say, wow, that's presuppositionalism. That's what that is. I know it. I can see it. And they may even accuse us of trying to kind of shroud that by swaddling it in a different name that's entirely driven by PR ambitions. It's legitimate concerns, legitimate aspirations to come up with a better name. but they'd still be able to recognize a rose. With all this being said, however, what I referred to as good presuppositionalism is accused by Trent of being a misnomer. Trent writes, quote, "If the presuppositionalist offers arguments that claim that other presuppositions don't work, and only his theology explains the world, then he's doing natural theology, albeit in a strange, backward sort of way." That's like, and I hate saying this, but this is kind of like, it's kind of like a situation where, and by the way, no, I am not talking about ahistoric Thomism. I'm talking, Bonaventure and Thomas had a major disagreement. It's in the chat. I'm talking about Anthony. So sometimes people come in and they're like, you don't know what you're talking about. You're talking about, dude, we did an entire episode going through an article an essay over at Church Life Journal, part of the McGrath Institute. Excellent article, by the way, on Bonaventure and his disagreements with St. Thomas and the analysis of that interplay that went back and forth and what made them different and why they evaluated, for example, Anselm's second ontological argument differently, and the idea of divine illumination and the way that that plays a role. Okay, so the various ways, and what do we know of God? Is he indubitably known? Indubitably, right? To each and every person. And that there's no thing, no place, no fact, no truth that you could possibly get away from that indubitable evidence. Because that's what Bonaventure says. And I'm of that tradition. Okay? So I'm not meaning to be rude about it. I'm just simply saying, yeah, look, I know a lot of Thomists, and we'll talk, I'll do an episode about all the various, will the real Thomism please stand up? Because there seems to be a lot of different kinds, but they're all LARPing a lot of times where they're the only ones and it's all this unified front and it's just Thomism. And they don't realize like the kind of infight, I mean, crazy amounts of infight. I'm not accusing you of that. I'm saying an enormous number of people, when they talk about it, it's like it's just one thing. And you go, and that's the end of it. That's the end of it. That you cannot come back and say, and even Copleston admitted this, right? In his books on philosophy, his excellent work, the multi-volume series on philosophy, saying that it's possible that one day Bonaventurian theology and philosophy would find itself on the ascendant. He didn't believe that was the case. My goal is to surprise him. I'll leave it at that. And if you want to know more, you can find the video that has to do with the indubitable knowledge of God, because we went through it. I mean, we went back and forth. You had quotes from Thomas, quotes from Bonaventure, quotes from Thomas, quotes from Bonaventure, and the way that debate between those two brilliant doctors of the church, in fact, both of them angelic, one the seraphim, one the angelic doctor. And so, you know, you look and you say both of them are angelic doctors in that regard. And so it's hearkening back to a very, very old debate and discussion. But Trent said that it's going in a weird, backward sort of way. The first thing to recognize, and that's the end quote. So Collins says, the first thing to recognize is that the claim that this notion of presuppositionalism is making use of natural theology is no objection to distinctly Catholic presuppositionalism, since Catholic presuppositionalists do not reject natural theology in the first place. Yeah. So that's not even a question. So the article where the Howler was in, where he dumped us into the exact same bin as those who reject natural theology, from the gate, he's wrong. From the gate. We can also understand this as an objection along the lines that this conception of presuppositionalism is not sufficiently differentiated from evidentialism as a method of apologetics. Okay? So he would believe that, okay, it's not sufficiently set apart. And he uses evidentialism in a way, we're talking classical theism, right? So the classical apologetic. He avoided that early on. I need to say that for clarity. Okay. But I think this betrays too rigid a distinction on Trent's part between different methods of apologetics, particularly with respect to evidentialism and presuppositionalism. The difference between the two approaches is not that one uses arguments and reasoning and the other doesn't. Anyone who's followed my work, I don't know The only time where you have authority through divine revelation, where it's just purely let's go to the Bible verse, is the invincible argument of St. Francis de Sales. And he calls it that. I'm not calling it that. I'm simply saying what he said about it. And I agree with him. I agree with St. Francis de Sales and who he was echoing from long before in St. Irenaeus, that when both of them talked about their methodology, when they talked about what they were about to do in their debate with heretics, they believed that the method that they were using of holy preaching, that this particular method, unlike others, could be applied almost equally to all heretics everywhere. And it's because they constantly are driving them back to their most basic and ruling assumptions and showing that without a specific set of assumptions, and de Sales particularly, because de Sales is constantly going back to St. Matthew 18, constantly. And he never phrased it this way, but I'd have to imagine that because of the role that it plays as the ultimate authority on disputes, that itself, that in and of it, we're talking heaven and hell, we're talking heaven and on earth, the keys, what is bound and what is loosed in that sense, and that there's no recourse after the church has made a verdict. It doesn't say if the church makes a verdict, but you've got a mega dope argument, you can keep it going and it's not a problem. It doesn't say that. That's the end of that. In that regard, it's the ultimate authority, and as such, it can be argued for transcendentally. Just try to plug in any other ecclesiology and tell me how you come out. If you can come out the same way, that if a person doesn't accept it, that they're a heathen and a tax collector. The club might treat them that way. Not many are doing it anymore. And in reality, would they even have the right to? They don't even claim to be infallible, and they don't claim to have the keys. So he goes like this. He says, in the specific case of Catholic apologetics geared toward Protestants, the evidentialist or classical apologist starts with the assumption that when it comes to things like divine revelation and sacred scripture, the Catholic apologist and his Protestant, the person he's debating with here, are on neutral or shared ground. You can see this in the debate that Trent Horn had with a guy over Marian dogmas. He takes a position, kind of a foundationalist position with perspicuity of scripture and debating all that, and I was very critical of that, okay? The Catholic apologist, right, that they're sharing this ground, it's neutral. By contrast, presuppositionalism does not concede any such neutral ground. To be sure, the presuppositionalist relies on the person he's debating against sharing beliefs about his first principles, but he will not simply grant those principles to the person he's debating. Instead, the presuppositionalist will hold that individual, hold their feet to the fire, and will try to show that the very principles that that individual rely on to critique the Christian worldview are principles which do not cohere with the person they're debating with their own worldview. So there we are again. We are not answering the fool according to his folly, lest we be like unto him. And yet we are also answering the fool according to his folly, lest he be wise in his own conceit. We're coming down to the end. We're coming down to the end. Next, consider the different emphases of each method. Evidentialism proceeds by building a comprehensive case for the Christian worldview, piece by piece, argument by argument. The emphasis is on giving arguments, typically chains, in fact, of arguments. By contrast, presuppositionalism proceeds by starting at the Christian worldview as a whole and showing how it accounts for reality by way of argumentation, to be sure. From there, the fundamental presuppositions of alternative worldviews are examined, and they are shown to be inconsistent with reality. We talk about that all the time, right? Breaking down how, if in fact what they say is true, that it would make it would make our experiences unintelligible. It would cave in on itself. It's missing the cornerstone. And because it's missing the cornerstone, its foundation in and of itself, it can't even account for its foundation. And insofar as it refuses to account for its foundation, it is building a house on sinking sand. It may be a beautiful castle. It will be entirely engulfed by the end. The emphasis is on worldview comparison, comparing and contrasting whole theories of reality using criteria such as explanatory power, explanatory scope, and simplicity. Given these facts, one could characterize evidentialism as argument-driven and presuppositionalism as theory-driven. In a lot of ways, the presuppositionalist mindset is in line with confirmation holism, the kind of confirmation holism of the philosopher Willard Van Orman Quine. In a nutshell, confirmation holism essentially holds that individual truth claims are not confirmed or disconfirmed individually. Rather, what are confirmed and disconfirmed are sets of truth claims. They're not isolated. There's ramifications. You say, well, if it's part of a system in your mind, you've assembled it as a whole, that this makes sense because of that, because of that, because of that. Even if you're arguing for that one particular thing, there is still in the background, and in fact, providing meaningfulness and intelligibility to the thing you're talking about, that isolated thing, and because of that, because of that, because of that. We just like to put a spotlight on that and then bite down like a pit bull and not let go. Rather, what are confirmed and disconfirmed are sets of truth claims, i.e. whole theories, whereas the evidentialist seeks to confirm truth claims individually and to thereby build up to a theory. The presuppositionalist seeks to confirm or disconfirm sets of truth claims by beginning with a theory. Trent might still think that there's something backward, right, with this whole thing, in the sense that the presuppositionalist simply begins with a theory and descends to the data, whereas the proper order would seem, anyway, to begin with the data and ascend to a theory. In response, a presuppositionalist could say that the beginning of the data first, rather than the theory, is necessary. So not just that it's useful, but in fact, it's actually necessary. And why? Why would it be necessary? Right? Only if one doesn't already know that the theory is true. And the Christian presuppositionalist will say that he already knows Christianity to be true, for instance, by divine revelation. I would go and say by the impossibility of the contrary. The 20th century Thomist theologian, right, Garrigou-Lagrange, though not himself a presuppositionalist, explains this as follows. And here's a quote. It's one of the reasons I love this guy. I do, man. I love you, homie. Oh, buddy, you're the man. So what is it here? Quote, this is Lagrange. According to the traditional conception of apologetics, the apologete, the apologist, does not present himself as though he were lacking faith and investigating into it like a mere seeker. So stop there for a second. He's not approaching it like he's neutral. Like he's like, yeah, I don't really know if this is true. I'm gonna LARP on this, and that's why I've accused people of LARPing when they pretend to be neutral, and they say, oh no, I'm not just presuming this stuff to be true. I'm like, oh, so you're leaving your brain at the door? You're leaving your spirit at the door? What are you doing? Leaving your faith at the door? You're out of your mind. Because your faith is ultimately going to also inform, in fact. The church is explicit about this. It's not this kind of thing that is such a rigid divide that one doesn't inform the other or that one doesn't have primacy. That's why the church is able to intervene at times on that matter. That's why. Instead, as the name apologete implies, he's a defender of the faith. Therefore, whatever he may prudently need to do per accidens in order to convince this or that non-believer who is lacking in faith, nonetheless, per se and normally, he presents himself as the apostles and the fathers did, namely, as a member or minister of the Catholic Church. And that's from the book On Divine Revelation, Volume 1, page 73. Yeah. However, right, Now, he says, adversaries indeed object, then the apology does not proceed in a scientific manner because under the direction of faith, he's already certain concerning the conclusion to be reached. Response, okay, so Colin's like, look, they're saying that, well, if we're going that way, then you're already assuming that it's true. And I'm like, are you? Are you planning to go to Mass? Or isn't it weird that you're supposed to have this kind of certainty in the faith, that you're supposed to be assured of these things? Deepening, making it richer and richer, deeper and deeper, wider and wider all the time. And yet you're constantly wanting to get into debates where you're going to judge yourself because you walk into the debate fully convinced that it's true. That's really weird. What are you debating? Are you like trying to find out like legitimately, hey man, are we going to find the bones of, the Lord and stuff? Is that where you are in your life? That'd be very strange. As a Christian? Wow. Response, I concede that he does not proceed scientifically in the manner of physics and metaphysics. However, he proceeds in a rational and sapiential manner, like the prophets and apostles who were the first apologetes and presented themselves not as seekers but as defenders of truth of faith. And I would take exception a little bit and say that is true, but I don't come at an unbeliever and try to make him account for Romans 1. You know what I mean? I'm not out there doing that. So for me, I'm using reason. I'm using logic. I'm using, in fact, the same arguments that have been made for over 2,000 years in defense of things, for example, like logic, and the same kind of arguments that are used by classical apologists when debating on behalf of universal norms of morality. I'm simply applying it to other things too, including, by the way, epistemology. Nor does the direction of faith diminish the rationality of the defense. Of course not. If the probative strength of the motives proposed by God can be defended by reason alone, indeed, Christ himself, as well as the apostles, gave the true notions of revelation, faith, credibility, and the church's infallibility, and they presented the signs for the defense of the faith. As a kind of minister of Christ and the church, apologetics accepts all these things handed down, right? Handed on by the church's magisterium, and rationally defends them by showing that those who deny or place in doubt the fact of revelation must necessarily deny, or at least place in doubt, what is held as certain in metaphysics, cosmology, or in history, e.g., the existence of God, his providence, the possibility of miracles, and the utterly certain historical testimony concerning the existence of miracles. And before making use of philosophical or historical argument, even fundamental theology judges it, at least negatively, under the superior light of revelation and of faith, inasmuch as that argument is not opposed to revealed data, but, on the contrary, agrees with them. Yeah. And it's true, it is a privilege of the divine science. Yeah. Which defends itself as well as the stronghold of the faith from on high. It's true, right? So you go, look, it's a prerogative. John Paul II talks about it. That's why the church can interject and say, no, you cannot believe these things. It's very hesitant and reluctant to do so because it doesn't want to tamper with the otherwise autonomous, right, separate methodology. To say the method that we use when coming to this, we do not start with the Bible. We do not start with that. But that doesn't mean that when we're engaged in that we go, okay, let me do the schizophrenic thing and put the Bible on hold in my brain and not accept the fact that that's the case. And if you do, I mean, maybe that's a neat little mental exercise you've got going on. But if you actually believe that on a scale that it's even close, you're out of your mind. In fact, I don't even know how good of a Catholic you'd be. You'd be a weirdo. I don't understand that. Thus, the methodology of apologetics must be determined from the conclusion that apologetics aims at. And that's what I've been saying for a long time. The presuppositions, the method itself, and the conclusions, that there is a harmony between them. In the same way that someone is presupposing the ultimate authority of reason and then using reason to conclude reason. Because if they don't have a methodology that reflects their presuppositions, they're schizo. If they don't have a conclusion that matches their presuppositions and their method, they're schizo. And if they say, well, I'm not schizo, I just came to a different conclusion, it's not just the conclusion now, because that conclusion is going to end up being your presupposition next time. So if you conclude, by the way, that you're no longer a naturalist but a presuppositionalist, well, then guess what your new presuppositional framework is? That's what's going to happen. And then guess what your methodology is going to be? Stuff that doesn't preclude that, as the scientific crowd likes to do, by the way. However, quite clearly, this conclusion to be proven is not expressed against rationalists on the basis of authority of divine revelation. I would say, if you're going to them and saying, well, this is what the Bible says, therefore that's just all it is, right? That's it. However, I probably put more emphasis even on that, allowing it, like Bonaventure, to blend, like the Franciscans, in fact, to blend in my ideas regarding how we make that case. Right here. So yeah, you're not going in and saying, I'm not using St. Matthew 18, talking about and saying, I'm coming with St. Matthew 18, but I already know the end game. I already know the end game anyway. Right? I say the creed. I say the act of faith. I read the catechism. I subject myself to the Holy Roman Pontiff and the Magisterium, ecumenical councils and papal encyclicals. I'm not going to all of a sudden go, okay, time to shut off the brain for a moment. That's the sort of thing maybe the Jews got in trouble for back in the day. For then there would be a vicious circle, but instead is expressed against them in a rational manner. Yes, you use all sorts of arguments, all sorts of methods, all sorts of tactics that you use. Transcendental. Thus, the Christian apologist does not defend the faith as if he didn't already believe it, because that would be like trying to play chess against yourself or trying to scare yourself by putting a really spooky clown in a room that you know you're going to go into. That's not going to scare you because, why? Because you already know it. And you're not playing chess against yourself. Why? Because you're making the moves on the other side of the board. And you know the strategy you've got for those moves. Rather, so thus the Christian apologist does not defend the faith as if he didn't already believe it. Rather, he defends by the light of natural reason under the guidance of faith. I love that, by the way. The faith that he already knows to be true. Yes, bro. Yes. The apologist proves his case to the unbeliever using arguments relying on natural reason rather than faith, but nevertheless draws from the faith he already knows the resources needed for the rational defense of the faith. That is what we're going to talk about when we talk about Trinitarian ontology. We're going to talk about that in that exchange. We talked about it in the episode we did on foundationalism, coherentism, pragmatism, empiricism, rationalism. Talked about that. As Garrigou-Lagrange puts it, quote, revelation and faith direct their defense inasmuch as they indicate both the end to be obtained, credibility, by the way, in parentheses, and the rationality, knowable, efficacious means for obtaining it. So, one more time. Revelation and faith direct their defense, inasmuch as they indicate both the end to be obtained and the rationally knowable, efficacious means for obtaining it. And there we are. Presuppositions. means, method, conclusion, the interplay. So what differentiates them then, right? It would be their assumed starting points, their differing emphases. Thus, the first horn, no pun intended, of Trent's dilemma is rebutted. I would add, of course, also William Lane Craig. It's rebutted. We may conclude that presuppositionalism has not been shown to be an unviable method of apologetics. Not according to those arguments. Somebody may come, I wish them the best, to say, we're putting stuff out all the time. We're pushing super hard. Pedal to the metal, guns a-blazing, guns akimbo. Blam, 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 blam. We're just running in. We're rocking it out. There may come a day where somebody's got super duper arguments. It's like, oh yeah, we got it. So far, no. Not the Howler. And I think that that's one of those things that, to be brutally honest, for one, Colin, I know you're a humble guy, but you just rebutted William Lane Craig. Soak it in. Because in this conversation, both of them, if they, and I don't know, they wouldn't accept it, but come on, we know. The thing is you look at it and you go, you did well, my man. You did well on that argument. We all know there's going to be bound to be a whole bunch of other arguments. People don't just give up so fast, right? Confirmation bias is a big deal. So they're not just going to give up so fast. But neither are we. Neither are we. And speaking of not giving up, I'm leaving right now as soon as this chat's over, and I'm going right over to the Wolfpack chat. The link is in the description below. I'm going to go over there. I appreciate all of you. I appreciate with all of you in the chat. Totally awesome people. Very grateful for all of you. And, and make sure if you got criticisms, right there, PaleocratDiaries@gmail.com. I get pretty cool emails there sometimes. And I try to connect with people beyond that, kind of because I hate Gmail. I hate it. It's garbage. And so I say, well, why don't we call? Why don't we talk? Why don't we do a voice chat? Why don't we do a video chat? Something that's gonna break us free from that rigmarole. But you can start there. You can do that, PaleocratDiaries@gmail.com. If you would like to do interviews, speeches, or any other inquiry, make sure to contact me again, PaleocratDiaries@gmail.com, or do me a huge favor and connect with me on Telegram. You can do that at the Wolfpack chat, link in the description, or at Patreon. Okay? I now pay somebody, a good friend, tried and true blue, faithful, all-weather friend. I'm working with that individual, paying the money, putting the money where the mouth is, and saying, I believe in your dignity as a person. I believe in the dignity and the use of your time and the vision that you have, the dreams that you have in your life. I don't have a lot to offer, but I give you what I can, and we'll grow together. It's kind of what it is for all of this. It's bumpy. All sorts of crazy roads. People dying, people being born. People growing old, people enjoying their youth. But no matter what, all of us here, we're committed to this idea to never give up, keep on smiling, and memento mori.
I wanted to make people dream bigger thoughts.